Yung equity na ini-expect nyo, it's not there. It's just an imaginary one for now. Dito daw sa Canada, maraming house rich but cash poor. Alam nyo bang ibig sabihin nito? This means na merong malaking bahay pero halos wala nang matira sa other basic needs such as food and utilities. Up to the point na meron ako nakita na napakalaki yung bahay nila, as in bago, brand new, I think. Parang bagong tayong bahay, if I'm not mistaken. It's really big, huge. And they're like family of 3 or 4. And malamang ang mortgage nun ay maliit na yung $3,000 per month. Oh God. For me, that is really huge. $3,000 per month na mapupunta sa housing lang. Just for the mortgage alone. And I've seen na they're selling bottles. And don't get me wrong, walang masama sa pagbebenta ng mga bote or mga empty, recyclables dito sa Canada because that's a norm here. There's no discrimination on that. However, if you really have money for that really big house, I don't think you would be doing that. Just my opinion ha, it's just my opinion. I don't know what you do with your life. But for me, kung ganun kalaki yung bahay mo, you are house rich, but basically you are cash poor. Kasi why would you do that? For me, it doesn't make sense na it just doesn't add up. It doesn't balance. And that's just my opinion on that. Alam nyo ba, ang average house cost ng bahay dito sa Canada, like Canada-wide ha, ay around $700,000. Ganon kalaki. But that is like including, the big cities like Vancouver and Toronto. Pero dito sa Saskatchewan, yung talagang magandang bahay na 3-bedroom, like renovated and stuff, aesthetic, ganun, is naglalaro sa around $200 plus to $300 plus thousand. And ayon sa aking research, nasa around 60% ng household income ang binabayad ng mga individuals na to sa kanilang mortgage. Can you imagine, 60% ng income nyo ay mapupunta sa housing. And then, meron pang bills, kakain pa tayo, meron pang other necessities na kailangan nating i-attend, kailangan nating pagastusan, and not to mention, minsan kailangan pa nating tumulong sa mga pamilya natin na sa Pilipinas. For me, it really blows my mind kung around 60% yung housing nyo sa overall income na kinikita nyo buwan-buwan. Dahil ang ideal talaga ay nasa 30% lang na medyo makakahinga pa tayo kasi 70% of your income will go to other things, important things na will balance your life, not just house. Kasi merong iba nga na 2, 3 yung trabaho, and alam nyo ba ang ginagawa nila? Yung isang trabaho nila ay parang petics lang, and they work nights over there, and that's where they sleep. And for me, it doesn't make sense na maganda yung bahay mo, laki yung bahay mo na kinuha, and kailangan mo magtrabaho ng 2 or 3 para makip up yung lifestyle na yun, but you don't even sleep in your house anymore. Kasi nga, 2 or 3 yung trabaho mo, dun ka na natutulog sa isa mong trabaho. Like, does it make sense? Make it make sense, please. Dahil for me, it doesn't really add up. Why would you do that? And with the inflation from 2022 up to now, nagtaasan talaga yung interest. Well, actually, I've just seen a post from the Prime Minister's page na yung Bank of Canada either lowering their interest rates sa mortgage. I don't know what else. But if you have had renewed your mortgage this year or kakabili mo lang ng bahay, which means hindi mo siya nakuha, hindi ka pasok. At saka maraming kailangan pagbasehan dun sa interest na makukuha mo, interest rate. Hindi lang yung ganito na yung rate is ganun din yung makukuha mo. Kasi it all depends on your financial status. Like, your credit score, ganun, borrowing mo, kung kumuha ka ba ng sasakyan lately, ganun. So even though there's a news like that, it doesn't mean na it will really apply to you personally, like in your specific situation. Kasi alam nyo, pag house rich kayo but cash poor, is para kayong nakatira sa isang golden cage. Like literally, your house is like so nice, modern, and probably aesthetic na gustong-gusto nyo. Pero you are like living in a cage kasi parang nakakulong ka sa bayarin mo dyan sa bahay na yan. Kasi you got a house na hindi mo talaga ma-afford. Like in reality, kahit na may sweldo ka, kahit na yung sweldo mo every month is $4,000 and then yung bahay mo is $2,000. Just the mortgage alone $2,000. Not including property taxes and insurances and other stuff like that. That's really hard. You're like living in a cage. Para kang nakakulong talaga sa bahay na maganda, malaki, at saka magara. And of course, kapag ganito yung sitwasyon mo na there's barely left each month for your other, basic needs kasi everything goes to housing, there will be financial strain and it kinda will ruin your mental health. Kasi you will keep on thinking about this huge mortgage payment kahit na for you, you think you're happy but deep inside, you probably are not. If you cannot sleep because you're thinking sweldo na naman but there's nothing left and sometimes kailangan mo pang magkaskas sa credit card mo if there's other needs that comes up kasi there's nothing left on your paycheck, it will really take a toll sa mental health niyo. So for me, if you're on the edge right now of getting a house, you have to consider a lot of things. You have to think ahead, especially if you have young kids, like toddlers, like in grade school. You have to think that at some point only one of you will have to work. And if only one of you will have to work, like for example, your husband or the man in the house, siya lang magtatrabaho, if you can still afford the house with just one income. So that's one thing that you have to consider. Because if you have young kids, things may happen that you may need to stop working. That's the reality of life here in Canada, having young kids. You should own your house, not the other way around na your house owns you. You have to think about this saying talaga and consider this before you acquire a house. Kasi if you didn't realize, aside from the down payment, there will be closing costs. And if you live in places like, big cities, malaki din ang closing cost. And apart from that, pag nakatira na kayo sa bahay na yan, there will be unexpected costs. Like, for example, nag-breakdown yung washing machine, nag-breakdown yung water boiler or yung furnace ay hindi gumana, you have to do some repairs. Things like that adds up. And if you didn't consider these costs, nung bumili ka, you may be surprised. And like halimbawa, 60% na yung housing cost mo sa overall income mo. Where would you get these costs like repairs? And not to mention, meron pang insurance. You have to have an insurance, lalo na pag maganda yung bahay na kinuha mo. Kasi to protect you in case of, God forbid, fires and like things like that. And of course, the property taxes. Property taxes depends on where you live. So in our area, maliit na city, yung property tax namin right now is 1,600. Last year, it was 1,500 plus. This year, nag-increase siya ng konti. But when we were looking at houses sa mga like bigger cities, yung mga property taxes doon ay hindi mababa sa 2,000. So you have to consider that as well. A house is not always an asset. In my opinion. This is my opinion. Bakit ko nasabi to? Kasi I would only consider a house as an asset if my mortgage is not that big. Like for example, yung mortgage ko is not more than 30% sa income ko. I would say that's one of the good indication na for me it's an asset. And aside from that, I would consider that as an asset if I'm doing something like a small business, like a home business. Like there is an area of your house that you use for business that you can claim during tax return. Just like in our house, every year I claim a portion of our house, an area of our house that I use for my small business. So that's one of the clever ways na you're taking advantage of your house na nagiging asset talaga siya. So what would you do if you see a house that you really like, it's so beautiful for you, you're really drawn to that house na eto talaga yung bahay na dream mo, your dream house kumbaga. First of all, you will consider your income. How much are you making each month, you and your partner? And if ever, just like what I said, if you have young kids, consider na if ever one of you will have to stop working to tend to your child, to care for your children, is kaya nyo bang bayaran? If ever one of you is ma-lay off, kaya nyo bang bayaran? Like, you have to consider if meron ba kayong binabayarang sasakyan. And apart from that, apart from the down payment, yun, closing cost, taxes, maintenance, kumbaga, you have to see the big picture. You do not focus on one thing. You have to see the overall picture para mag-grasp nyo if you can really afford this house. Dahil yung iba na nag-iisip na it's an asset kasi mabibenta raw after, certain amount of years, certain time, dahil they're building an equity daw, you have to also consider because that house, yung equity na ini-expect nyo, it's not there. It's just an imaginary one for now. Dahil in the first place, nobody can predict the future. Magkakaroon ka ba talaga ng equity once you sell that house? Where is that location of that house? If by the time na kailangan nyo ibenta is the economy will be good, like, kumbaga, imaginary pa siya. Imaginary lang siya for now. It's not there and it's not liquid na kapag kailangan nyo ng pera, because you're thinking you have an equity na kailangan nyo ng pera, you need to sell your house, you need to downgrade, is it will be sold right away, which is not the reality of life. We cannot just like sold. No, we can't do that. Na kahit na you will think na things will go well because like, lately, ganito, ganyan yung nangyayari. One thing is for sure and absolute, you cannot predict the future. So that's just my thoughts about housing in Canada. Kasi one thing I've seen sa mga Filipino dito sa Canada is owning a house, they consider it as a success. But you have to keep in mind na balance is key. Do not chase that shining star. But then, after you get that star, you will fall hard on the ground. Parang ganun. Yun yung, parang for me, that's the analogy of it. And that's all for today's video, guys. That's all for today's housing topic that I can tell you. Now, this is not a financial advice. This is just based on my experience and my research. And I would like to know what you think about this video. And if you do have some thoughts about this, you can comment down below in the comment section. And I hope to see you guys again on my next video.